Okay, so we're going to look at a few problems that allows us to determine is it direct, inverse, or neither. And then if it is, how do we find k? So in this problem it says, is the relationship between the variables direct variation, inverse variation, or neither? Write the function rule with the direct and inverse variation. So we're going to apply our 4 steps. So the first thing I'm going to do is set up my t-chart, or my 4-step t-chart. And so step 1 is to determine our variation rule. So in this table, notice how my x's are increasing. And notice how my y's are increasing. So x's and y's are going in the same direction. So because we're going in the same direction, we're going to be direct variation. And so we're going to use the rule y equals kx. Now we need to find out what k is. So to find out what k is, we're going to plug in. And it doesn't matter what we plug into. We can go with the top one here, this ordered pair. When x is 1, y is 3. So I'm going to replace my y with 3. And I'm going to replace my x with 1. And I'm going to simplify. So 1 times k is k. So k is equal to 3. Okay, so that's step 2. We found k. So now step 3 is to write our function rule. And so it looks like our function rule is going to be y equals 3x. And so our last step is to check, because we want to make sure that this works. So if I take and I plug in, if I plug in these, so if I plug 2 into x, 3 times 2 is 6. So my rule works here. If I plug 5 into x, 3 times 5 is 15. So my rule works here. If I plug 6 into x, 3 times 6 is 18. So it checks out. Okay, so the first one, direct variation, and our function rule is y equals 3x. Okay, now we're going to look at our second one. So set up our 4 steps. First, we have to determine our variation rule. So x's are increasing, but y's are decreasing. So since that's the case, it appears that we're going to have inverse variation. And so since we're inverse variation, our rule is y equals k over x. So now we have our variation rule. So step 2, find k. So again, I'm going to plug in. I always just like to use the first point. It doesn't really matter which one you use. But sub in, because remember, your x's and your y's change. The k is the one thing that doesn't change. So I'm going to set it up. I'm going to replace my y with 4. And I'm going to replace my x with 1. And so to get x by itself, this is division. To undo division, we use multiplication. So I'm going to multiply 4 times 1. So k is equal to 4. So now we know what k is. So step 3 is our function rule. So our function rule is y equals 4 over x. And then step 4 is to check. We want to make sure it works. So go back and plug in. When I plug 2 into x, 4 divided by 2 is 2, so it checks out. When I divide 4 by 3, 4 divided by 3 is 4/3, so it checks out. When I divide 4 by 4, 4 divided by 4 is 1. So we've checked our other points. It works out. So now we have our function rule, and we know that it is inverse variation. Okay, so keep in mind the things that I told you. For direct and inverse variation, remember you're never going to have any addition or subtraction. It's always going to be multiplication or division. Remember, direct, it's going to be that y equals kx. Inverse is going to be the y equals k over x. And then also remember the ways that we represent a function. There's 3 ways. Your function rule, your table of values, and then a graph. So in problem number 2, we're now going to look at the graph. So I'm going to start the second video because this one's getting long. So watch the next video that goes with problem 2.